Harry's fake royal tour in Australia has been a catastrophe. It is a new low for the prince as fresh cracks appear in his marriage. More on that shortly. Shocking stuff. As he insults his father, the king, as he fails to achieve a sellout crowd for his boring speech about mental health, which was very bad for the mental health of those listening. And according to one of Australia's leading journalists, Harry was completely ignored.
The reaction to the Sussex tour in Australia didn't come through loud protests or organized pushback. It came through something way more damaging: pure indifference. Alexandra Marshall, online editor of The Spectator Australia and an ambassador for Australians for Constitutional Monarchy, broke it down in a way that hit hard and clear. Most Australians didn't even realize Harry and Meghan were in the country. People living in the same city carried on with their daily routines, completely unaware they were nearby. At one point on the Sydney waterfront, a woman relaxing on the beach didn't move as Harry walked past. Not because she was making a statement, but because she genuinely didn't know he was there. That kind of reaction says everything. For a couple whose entire public image depends on attention, being ignored is the worst possible outcome. You can't be constantly talked about online and at the same time walk through a major city unnoticed. You can't run a high-profile tour and have people completely miss it. There's also a clear contradiction that stood out. Meghan has spoken about being a major focus of online attention.
Journalist Richard Fitzwilliams told me on my Talk TV show this was a dress rehearsal for Harry and Meghan coming to the United Kingdom. Good luck with that, because Charles would have seen the headlines and the embarrassing behaviour and the money-obsessed activities. William will have seen the behaviour, the bad headlines, the money-obsessed activities, and neither will want anything to do with this couple.
Something she expressed strongly during a university talk. But at the same time, people like Alexandra Marshall admitted they had to look up what the couple were even doing, while they were reportedly just nearby in Sydney. Those two realities don't line up. The idea of major global impact and the reality of being overlooked just don't fit together. And Australia, the very place chosen to highlight their influence, ended up showing the opposite. Polling data added even more context. The most popular royal figure in Australia remains Queen Elizabeth II, even years after her passing. Right behind her is Princess Diana, still widely admired decades later. Both continue to hold stronger public support than any current royal figure. When it comes to the present day, the rankings tell a tough story. Harry sits near the bottom among living royals in terms of public support in Australia, and Meghan ranks last. The same couple that arrived aiming to reinforce their global presence found themselves in a country where many people simply weren't paying attention. The contrast becomes even sharper when compared to other visits. When King Charles visited Australia, the streets were filled with crowds.
Skills are an upgrade on the job his father, Charles, did. Now, let's not forget that this is a man in his late 70s who's battling cancer. And he's the king of the United Kingdom. You could afford him a little bit of respect. He's the king. Clues in the title. You kind of respect the king. He's an older man. And he's got a serious disease. He's actually not that well.
Real energy and genuine excitement. That kind of response can't be staged. It comes naturally. Harry's visit felt completely different. He arrived as a former royal figure with speaking engagements and personal projects. And the public response reflected that shift. Even Princess Anne, who avoids publicity and keeps a low profile, received a warmer and more authentic reaction during her time in Australia. Then came one moment that really caught people's attention near the end of the tour, during Meghan's event, described as a best lifestyle gathering. Harry was seen sitting off to the side, and then leaving early before she even finished speaking. People who attended said it stood out immediately. While Meghan remained on stage, Harry reportedly left quickly without waiting, without greeting her afterward, and without staying for the full moment. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was noticeable enough that people started talking.
To the Australian people for having to put up with these shallow grifters for 4 days. I'm really worried about what it's done to Australia. I suspect that the house prices have come crashing down. I would imagine that the wildlife have been quite upset. I would have thought the kangaroos have stopped hopping. That's how angry they are. I would have thought the koalas.
From a basic standpoint, that kind of situation usually calls for support and presence. If your partner is delivering a major talk, you stay. You show up, you're visible at the end, but that didn't happen here. And that's where the conversation starts to shift. Because moments like this don't exist in isolation. Over time, people begin connecting small details. Public appearances, body language, and different priorities all start forming a bigger picture. There have already been ongoing discussions about where both of them see their future. Harry's actions often point toward maintaining ties with the UK, including ongoing efforts related to returning and rebuilding certain connections. Meanwhile, Meghan's focus appears centered in California, with business projects, media opportunities, and a different kind of public life. Those two directions don't naturally align long-term. And when that gap becomes visible, even in small moments, people begin asking questions. That brief moment during the event, Harry leaving early, may seem simple on the surface, but to many observers, it felt like a rare, unscripted glimpse into something more real. For years, Harry has taken on many roles in public life: the soldier, the royal, the advocate, the speaker. And throughout it all, he's maintained a consistent image.
Speaking at the Inter-Edge Summit in Melbourne Park, where tickets were around $1,000 each, and by the way, they did not sell out. It was a small crowd and it wasn't a sellout because no one's interested in getting health advice, particularly mental health, from Harry.
But moments like this stand out because they feel less controlled, less planned, and more genuine. And sometimes it's those small, unexpected moments that spark the biggest conversations. He couldn't sit there and watch the rest of it. Not for another hour, not for another minute. So he got up and he left. And in that quiet exit, it felt like something real slipped through, something people weren't supposed to see. That moment alone started raising questions. But then came his speech at the Inter-Edge Summit, adding even more layers. Harry spoke openly about feeling lost, betrayed, and powerless at different points in his life. He said he had buried his emotions for years, holding everything in while things kept building up. He talked about how people today feel anxious, stressed, and overwhelmed. He praised Australia's approach to social media restrictions, calling it a strong move. He even spoke about how mental health support differs depending on where you live, saying he never felt like a city person in the first place. Then things took a deeper turn. He mentioned that during Meghan's pregnancy, his therapists warned him about becoming emotionally distant. That detail alone caught attention. But what really stood out was how he spoke about his mother. He made a statement suggesting that being a working royal was connected to what happened to her. And that's where the conversation becomes more serious.
Exhuming the ghost of poor old Diana. How dare he? And how do you think it makes William feel when Harry is using Diana for clicks, to boost his image, to boost his reputation, and ultimately for dollars? How do you think it makes William feel?
Because that claim has been discussed and examined for many years. Princess Diana passed away in Paris on August 31st, 1997, following a car crash involving a driver who was over the legal alcohol limit. At that time, she was not using her usual royal security team. After her separation, she had made personal decisions about her protection arrangements, which were no longer directly managed by the royal household. Security experts who were close to her situation have publicly shared that different protection arrangements could have changed the outcome. This perspective has been repeated over time and is part of the wider understanding of what happened. So when statements are made in a very simplified or casual way, it naturally draws attention. Not because people want to argue, but because the situation itself is complex and has been carefully reviewed over the years. What also stood out was the tone. The way these deeply personal topics were expressed felt surprisingly casual to many listeners. When people talk about major life events, especially involving close family, their words usually carry a certain weight. But here, the delivery felt lighter than expected, and that contrast became part of the discussion. Some see it as a result of repetition over time, others see it as emotional distance. But either way, it stood out.
That both Harry and Meghan were invisible on this trip. Their arrival failed to achieve a ripple among the Australian public. They didn't get the headlines they were hoping for, they didn't get the photo opportunities, and they didn't get the amount of cash that they were hoping to make either.
There was also another moment that caught attention. When speaking about his father's health, Harry used a similarly relaxed tone, saying he didn't know how much time was left. Again, it wasn't the message itself, but the way it was delivered that people focused on. Because when topics are that serious, the tone becomes just as important as the words. Meanwhile, Alexandra Marshall's perspective on the tour added another important angle. She wasn't watching from afar, she was actually in Sydney at the time. And despite being right there, she said she had to look up what the couple were doing. That says a lot about how the tour was received locally. Interestingly, more coverage came from international media than from Australian outlets. The story was getting attention overseas, while barely making an impact where it was actually happening. And that points to a bigger issue. If a tour is meant to connect with a local audience, but most of the attention comes from outside the country, then something isn't lining up. The humanitarian message needed local engagement. The events needed local interest. But the response just wasn't there in the way it needed to be. And that indifference. It wasn't forced. It wasn't organized. It was natural. People simply didn't react.
So he says, being a royal killed my mum, yeah? And I was very much against being a royal, a serving royal. And I stuck my head in the sand for years and years and years. Now, a couple of points of order. First of all, glibly talking about your mother's death. Killed my mum, yeah? Cool. Have you noticed how casual Harry is in a lot of his language?
That's what makes it powerful. At the same time, there's a more personal layer underneath all of this. There's been growing talk about where Harry really wants to be long-term. His actions often suggest a pullback toward the UK, toward familiar spaces and connections. Meanwhile, Meghan's direction seems focused on California, business ventures, and building a different kind of public life. Those paths don't easily align, and when that gap becomes visible, even in subtle ways, people start noticing. The tour was meant to show unity, purpose, and strong public connection. But instead, it revealed something more complicated. The events didn't fully land. The crowds weren't as strong as expected. Many people didn't even know they were there. And that one moment, Harry leaving early, became a symbol of something bigger. It looked like someone searching for a certain kind of validation and not quite finding it. Because the kind of public connection tied to royal life isn't something you can fully recreate on your own terms. It comes with a structure, a role, and expectations that can't be easily replaced. Trying to balance both worlds at the same time comes with real challenges. And the tour made that clearer than ever.
Comes to Australia and barely anybody notices. I wouldn't say that's positive. I'm an ambassador for Australians for constitutional monarchy, so I do have a general love of the monarchy here.
Yeah.
And when Princess Anne came, there was far more love and affection for Princess Anne than this current royal tour.
Looking ahead, there are still opportunities for things to shift. Events like the Invictus Games provide a space where Harry has strong support and recognition. Ongoing discussions around security and access could also play a role in shaping what comes next. But for now, the Australian tour left behind a very specific impression, one that people are still talking about. The family side of this situation still matters more than anything. If King Charles remains open to contact, and if Prince William stays even slightly within reach, that creates the emotional backdrop for everything that follows. But right now, the latest evidence shaping that picture comes straight from the Australian tour, and it's not looking strong. A tour that was barely noticed locally, covered more by international media than by Australians themselves, and wrapped up with Harry leaving before Meghan even finished speaking. Attention was expected, but the energy just wasn't there. That one line says everything. And now, with summer approaching, whatever comes next will be compared to that reality. A tour that aimed to prove relevance, but struggled to leave a mark where it actually happened. When you look at the numbers and expectations behind it, the gap becomes even clearer. In this space, success follows certain patterns. A strong keynote speaker fills rooms, but Harry's appearance at the summit needed price reductions just to get closer to capacity. And even then, it didn't fully fill out. A successful lifestyle or wellness brand usually builds momentum through visible demand and strong engagement.
Told the Times newspaper it was the most unusual thing. People were taking pictures of Meghan on the stage, and Harry sort of rushed out really quickly. He didn't wait for her to come off the stage, didn't collect her from the stage. It was really, really odd. The same guest added, I sat there, and everyone kept on going on about how handsome Harry was.
But the rollout tied to this tour didn't show clear signs of that traction. A well-positioned retreat should sell out quickly and create ongoing buzz through attendees sharing their experiences. But this retreat didn't sell out, stayed mostly closed off from outside visibility, and ended with a short appearance that caught people off guard. And then there's the biggest benchmark of all, public response. A successful royal-style visit brings crowds, excitement, and widespread local coverage. But here, the reaction was mostly quiet, with limited reporting and a noticeable lack of public engagement. Each of these points on their own might not mean much. Any event can face challenges, But when every single indicator falls short at the same time, it starts to paint a much bigger picture. It suggests to fully sustain the experience that had been promised. And when you compare that to figures like Princess Anne, the difference becomes even sharper. She doesn't chase attention, doesn't build commercial projects around her public role, and doesn't turn appearances into personal branding moments. She simply shows up, does the work, and moves on. And because of that, she receives genuine warmth from the public, the kind that can't be created overnight.
That show that Queen Elizabeth is still the most popular royal, and she's no longer with us. The second most popular is Diana, who is also not with us. Right down the bottom, second last is Meghan, and third last is Harry.
That kind of trust builds slowly, through consistency, through service, and through actions that don't feel tied to personal gain. That's the key difference. Because public connection at that level isn't something you can recreate through strategy alone. It comes from a very specific set of conditions: long-term commitment, clear purpose, and a focus that goes beyond personal branding. Over the past few years, Harry and Meghan have taken a very different approach. Their path has included business ventures, controlled messaging, structured appearances, and carefully managed visibility. And people can feel that difference. It doesn't mean one approach is right or wrong, but it does mean the public reacts differently to each. And in Australia, that reaction came through clearly, not through criticism, but through silence. That silence spoke louder than anything else. Then there's the personal side, which continues to draw attention. Observers have been watching closely for signs of how things are evolving between them. And that moment at the retreat became a key point. Harry sitting off to the side, then leaving early before Meghan finished speaking. It was seen, it was discussed, and it stood out. Guests described it as unusual. Not dramatic, not chaotic, just unexpected enough to raise eyebrows. And moments like that are harder to control because they come from real-time observation, not staged appearances. Around 150 people were there to witness it. It was picked up in reporting, and it added another layer to the ongoing conversation. Because when something feels unscripted, that's when people pay the most attention. And now all of these details, the quiet crowds, the limited engagement, the mixed signals, they're all being added together, not as separate moments, but as part of one bigger story that's still unfolding. It happened in real time. People saw it, people talked about it, and it didn't stay hidden. And when you start looking at the body language throughout the tour,
One person didn't move out of the way. There's a great clip of, I think you're going to play it now, of a woman lying sunbathing in the sand, and she sort of doesn't even know they're there. That's a great image for how Australia has received the royals. I've noticed there's more interest in the US tour with the King going over to the anniversary of the US there than there has been at the Meghan tour.
it adds even more to the overall picture. There was constant hand-holding, repeated physical closeness, moments that seemed carefully maintained rather than natural. Multiple observers pointed out that it didn't always feel effortless. It felt managed. And that slight sense of effort in public affection, that's what caught attention. Because in strong, stable partnerships, you don't usually need to show it that much. When everything is solid underneath, it just flows. But when the display becomes intense and consistent, people start reading into it. And that's exactly what happened here. Then there's Alexandra Marshall's perspective, which stayed measured but still revealing. She suggested that one of them may be more interested in returning to Britain than the other. And when pressed, she made it clear she didn't believe Meghan was particularly eager to go back to the UK. That observation lines up with everything else people are seeing. Their current lifestyle in Montecito is built around Meghan's direction. The business side, the partnerships, the public image, it's all rooted in California. That's where the opportunities are. That's where the connections are, and that's where her focus stays. Britain offers something very different. It offers royal proximity, tradition, and structure, but it also comes with expectations and limitations. And that's where the contrast becomes clear. Because Harry's position looks completely different, his actions continue pointing back toward the UK, toward family, toward role, toward a sense of purpose tied to where he came from. He's appeared at memorial events wearing his medals.
Do not know these two are in the country. Even if they're in the same city, they probably don't even know they're in the same street. That is a total failure of the Sussex brand.
He's spoken about his past and his family in ways that connect directly to that world. He's continued efforts around security discussions, which are closely linked to recognition and status within that system. For him, it's not just about safety, it's about connection. And that creates a clear split in direction. On one side, California, business, and independence. On the other, Britain, structure, and legacy. Those paths don't easily merge long-term. When you look at the Australian tour through that lens, it starts to feel like more than just a public visit. It looks like an attempt to prove something, to show relevance, to show demand, to show that the current path works. But the outcome didn't support that. The institution itself didn't react in any major way. The response stayed distant, and the most honest reflection of the tour's impact came from a simple moment: someone in the same city having to search online to figure out what was even happening. That says everything. There were no major crowds, no overwhelming buzz. Events that were expected to draw attention felt quiet instead. And then those small but telling moments, leaving early, limited engagement, subtle disconnects, they all added up. Looking ahead, the next chapter will likely play out differently in some ways. Britain brings a completely different environment, stronger media focus, closer ties to the institution, and higher personal stakes for everyone involved. But at the same time, the approach may stay the same: structured appearances, controlled access, carefully managed narratives, and a mix of public-facing and private events. That formula has already been used multiple times, and Australia became the clearest test of how it performs. So the big question now is simple. Will that same approach land differently in Britain, or will the response follow the same pattern? Because while opinions can vary, one thing is much clearer after this tour. The current state of the brand is now visible through real outcomes. Polling placing them near the bottom in popularity rankings, limited local awareness during a major visit, smaller than expected event engagement, and moments that stood out for all the wrong reasons. Even small details became symbolic. A short appearance that didn't match expectations, a partner leaving early, a beachgoer not reacting at all. Put it all together, and it paints a very specific picture. A brand that has reached a turning point, where the current strategy may no longer be enough to carry it forward. If anything is going to change from here, it won't be small or subtle. It's going to take something major, something undeniable. Either the relationship shifts in a visible way, the business model gets rebuilt from the ground up, the connection to the institution evolves, or all three move at once. Because if nothing changes, the direction stays exactly where it is right now. And that direction is clearly struggling to hold momentum. The next big moment is already on the horizon. Summer is coming, and whatever unfolds next will be judged side by side with what just happened in Australia. Every appearance, every crowd, every headline will be compared back to that tour, and that one simple image will keep coming back. The woman on the beach who didn't react, didn't move, didn't even notice. That moment wasn't loud, but it said everything. Now take that situation and place it next to what was happening at the same time on the global stage. King Charles was in Washington, handling real diplomatic responsibilities, representing the country. All of this while dealing with personal health challenges that would slow most people down. That's not performance. That's responsibility. That's the weight of the role in real time. And at the exact same moment, Harry was in Australia, moving through events that were presented as meaningful and important, but felt carefully structured, controlled, and disconnected from the wider public. That contrast is sharp. It's not just two different trips, it's two completely different realities playing because both sides are visible. Both stories are unfolding in real time, and people are watching them side by side, whether intentionally or not. One side represents what the institution is built to do. There were no overwhelming crowds filling the streets, no strong local buzz-building momentum, no wave of excitement spreading from one event to the next. Even with everything planned out, everything scheduled, everything presented with intention, it didn't fully connect with the audience it was meant to reach. And that's what makes this moment so important. Because this wasn't random. This was a tour designed to show relevance, to prove influence, to demonstrate that the connection with the public was still strong. But the result told a different story. The warmth that once followed them didn't show up in the same way. The attention that used to come naturally now felt harder to generate. And when that shift becomes visible, people start asking real questions. Why didn't it land? Why didn't it connect? What's changed? And those questions don't come from one moment. They come from a pattern. The smaller crowds, the limited awareness, the short appearances, the early exit that caught attention, the quiet reactions from the public. All of it builds into one clear picture. A picture that shows something is off balance, because public attention at that level isn't easy to maintain. It requires consistency, clarity, and a connection that feels genuine over time. And when that connection weakens, it doesn't disappear overnight. It fades gradually. That's what this looked like. Not a dramatic collapse, but a slow shift that became impossible to ignore. Now everything turns toward what comes next, because the next chapter won't just be about new locations or new events, it will be about whether anything actually changes behind the scenes. Will the strategy stay the same? Will the approach evolve? Will the direction shift in a noticeable way? Those are the real questions now, and they matter, because repeating the same formula after this kind of response could lead to the same outcome. But changing course comes with its own challenges. It means rethinking priorities, adjusting expectations, and possibly stepping into spaces that come with different rules and different pressures. That's not an easy move. At the same time, the personal dynamic continues to draw attention as well. People are watching closely, picking up on small details, noticing moments that feel different from before, and that's natural. Because when public figures operate at this level, every visible moment becomes part of the bigger story. That one moment during the tour, the early departure, may seem small on its own, but in the context of everything else, it became symbolic. It became one more detail that people added to the overall picture. And when enough of those details start lining up, the conversation grows. Not because of speculation, but because of what people can actually see. That's where things stand right now. A tour that was meant to reinforce strength ended up raising new questions instead. A moment that was meant to build momentum instead highlighted the gap between expectation and reality. And a response that was expected to be loud ended up being almost completely silent. That silence is what people are still talking about, because it's not easy to ignore. And now, with the summer ahead, everything moves into the next phase, a new setting, a new environment, and a new chance to shift the narrative. But the standard has already been set. Australia became the reference point, and whatever happens next, it will be measured against that. So the real question is simple. Will the next chapter change the direction or confirm it? Because at this stage, staying the same might not be enough. And that's why all eyes are on what happens next. So what do you think about everything that just unfolded? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to see it. And I'll catch you in the next one.